2 weeks before our wedding, everything appeared to be going smoothly. Then, out of nowhere, my fiancé suggested we attend a joint therapy session. She had been seeing a therapist on her own for a while, but this was the first time she had asked me to accompany her. She framed it as a chance for us to have an honest and transparent conversation before stepping into marriage. I found it a bit unconventional, but I agreed. I believed we already communicated well, so I was curious more than concerned. What caught me off guard was her willingness to involve me in something so private. She had always kept her therapy sessions to herself, never mentioning much about them, let alone inviting me to participate. Letting me into that personal space didn't feel like her at all. Still, I decided to go with an open mind. When the day came, I felt both intrigued and uneasy. To steady my nerves, and because something just didn't sit right with me, I discreetly turned on my phone's voice recorder before entering. I arrived to find she was already inside. After waiting for about 20 minutes, I was called in. The therapist greeted me warmly, offered a handshake, and tried to ease the tension with some small talk. But something she said made me uneasy. She noted that I wasn't quite how my fiancé had described me. Though it came off as a compliment, it left a strange taste in my mouth. She then turned to my fiancé and said, "This might be tougher than we thought." That line sent a chill through me. I stayed calm, despite feeling more uneasy by the second. The therapist began discussing how modern relationships are evolving and shifting. As she spoke, my fiancé held my hand while the therapist talked about embracing a progressive view of marriage. At first, I thought she meant sharing responsibilities or supporting each other's goals. But then the truth hit me. The therapist revealed that my fiancé wanted to be free to have sexual experiences with other men, even after we were married. To make matters worse, she didn't want to extend the same freedom to me. She admitted she was afraid I might fall for someone else and leave her. It quickly became obvious this conversation had been pre-planned, and I was just the final piece being delivered the pitch. I sat in stunned silence, though my thoughts were spiraling. When they had finished speaking, I looked at the therapist and asked one question: "Are you actually licensed?" She seemed surprised by my response but confirmed her qualifications. Then I turned to my fiancé and said plainly, "This is exactly why we're not getting married. And we're done. I wish you both well." Without another word, I walked out, determined to file a formal report against the therapist. Over the next few days, I played the recording back several times. It confirmed everything I remembered, and made things worse. The session had felt more like a setup than a discussion. The therapist's behavior struck me as manipulative and deeply unethical. I started researching how to file a complaint. Regardless of her influence, the outcome would have been the same. I could never accept an open marriage, especially not one as clearly one-sided as this. It went against everything I believed marriage should be. As I reflected, I began piecing together old behaviors and realizing there may have already been infidelity. Certain moments now looked more suspicious with hindsight. That realization helped me come to terms with ending the engagement. Still, it didn't spare me from the difficult conversations that followed. Friends and family wanted answers, but I wasn't ready to reveal the full truth. Meanwhile, my ex seemed to be spinning her own version of events. She started blowing up my phone, contacting my loved ones, and begging for a chance to explain. Her story kept changing. First, she claimed she had misunderstood the therapist's point. Then she said the whole idea had been the therapist's suggestion, not hers. She promised she'd fix everything and swore she'd do whatever it took. But I had made up my mind. I immediately canceled our wedding, backed out of our joint financial plans, and withdrew from the mortgage we had applied for. She later tried to justify her behavior by saying therapy had brought up her insecurities about our pasts. She pointed out that I had more sexual experience than she did, and claimed the therapist had recommended she catch up to make things feel more balanced. No matter what her excuse was, my answer stayed the same. With help from a colleague who practices law, I began preparing official complaints against the therapist, one for the clinic and one for the American Psychological Association. My lawyer pointed out something troubling. The therapist repeatedly used phrases like, "we believe" or "we decided," which made her sound more like a co-conspirator than a neutral professional. As I dug deeper, I found alarming reviews from others who had seen the same therapist. Two of her former clients, who we reached out to, shared eerily similar stories of unethical behavior, and we added their accounts to our complaint. The formal letters detailed the events of the session, the therapist's inappropriate conduct, and the obvious change in my fiancé's behavior after beginning therapy. By the end of that week, I invited both families over to my house to confront the situation face to face. My ex arrived with her parents, and with my family present, even more concerning details came to light that further validated my concerns about the therapist. Once the complaints were submitted, the clinic responded swiftly, and it wasn't long before the issue began gaining traction. Now, I'm trying to sort through the fallout. Friends and relatives still want to know what happened, but I'm not sure how much I should say. While the recording proves everything, I'm hesitant to publicize it, unless her version strays too far from reality. If it does, I'll have no problem setting the record straight. For now, I'm focused on moving forward and making sure that therapist is held accountable for what she did. Then, on a quiet Thursday morning, our office got a call. The nature of the inquiry wasn't immediately clear, leaving us unsure whether it was something serious or an elaborate joke. The call eventually connected us with someone who identified themselves as either a legal representative or affiliated with their legal department. After verifying the legitimacy of our concerns, we faintly heard what sounded like a muffled curse slip from their end. They reassured us that the matter was being treated with urgency. One colleague speculated that this might not be the first complaint of its kind, but ours carried more compelling proof than most. In a follow-up message, they mentioned the situation had been escalated to the American Psychological Association, which explained their sudden responsiveness. While I initially believed my involvement had ended, conversations with two others who had previously been under the same therapist's care left me hoping a formal investigation would begin. It became disturbingly clear that her methods were not only unethical but actively harmful, creating division instead of healing. The individuals I spoke with included one woman and, later, my ex-fiancée and her parents. The following Friday, my parents asked me to stop by after work. To my dismay, when I arrived, I saw my ex and her parents already waiting in the driveway. The sight of their cars immediately made me want to turn back. I had hoped to approach the situation at my own pace, but she had taken the initiative instead, something I wasn't ready for and didn't appreciate. She stood outside looking as composed and polished as ever, the kind of presence that left a favorable impression on anyone. She said they had come to talk about reconciliation, which led me to believe she either hadn't told her parents the full truth or they simply didn't believe it. Clutching a journal, she claimed reading it would help me understand. I brushed off the idea, telling her this wasn't a book club, and started walking toward the house. She reached out, voice shaking, asking for 10 minutes alone before involving our parents. Her eyes were filled with tears as she extended the journal again. Just then, our sisters appeared, likely having stepped out to see what was happening. I reluctantly took the journal, greeted them briefly, and led my ex to a quiet spot in my parents' large garden, a secluded area tucked beneath old trees with benches nearby. There, she began opening up. She revealed she had recently resigned from her job after suffering a complete emotional breakdown. Her mental health had deteriorated rapidly, worsened by a therapist who, instead of helping her heal, steered her down a destructive path. Initially, she'd sought counseling for work-related stress, but the therapist kept redirecting the focus toward our relationship. She confessed that her parents still didn't know the full truth about our breakup. She also shared that she had started sessions with a new therapist, one who seemed far more qualified and helpful. I mostly listened in silence, letting her say what she needed to say. Eventually, she shifted the conversation toward wanting to repair what we had lost. She made sweeping promises, offering to give up control of finances, allow full access to her devices, share her location at all times, and ensure any future assets would be in my name. These were the same desperate reassurances she had been texting for weeks, but hearing them in person felt even more troubling. It didn't seem like love anymore. It felt like panic. I then asked her directly if she had been unfaithful. Her answer was infuriating. She admitted to being in situations where cheating could have happened, but swore she never crossed the line. Even if I believed her, the fact she had placed herself in those situations was infuriating. It was like saying, I was about to commit a crime but changed my mind. The fact that she saw those moments as opportunities made it worse. I suggested we rejoin our parents for a fuller conversation and asked that our sisters not be part of it. My sister initially protested but eventually stepped aside. Once inside, I shared everything. How the therapy sessions unfolded, how her request for an open marriage blindsided me, and why I called off the wedding. I didn't mention any recordings, since I didn't need to. To my surprise, my ex confirmed what I said, point by point. Her father became visibly emotional, tears welling up in his eyes. Her mother asked her, directly and quietly, whether this behavior reflected the values they raised her with. My ex repeated her story: burnout, depression, a misguided therapist who convinced her that our relationship was the source of all her pain. She claimed the therapist even told her I had wanted an open marriage, and that she needed to match my past experiences to keep me interested. She admitted my reaction had jolted her awake, forcing her to abandon that toxic narrative. She had left her job and was now looking for something less mentally draining. Through tears, she again promised she'd do anything to make things right. She insisted that the journal would give me clarity, that I would see things differently after reading it. She said she had doubted the therapist but followed their advice out of blind trust. At that point, my parents turned to me, waiting for some kind of response. I tried to lighten the mood with a poorly timed joke, something about only reading journals if they were written by dead poets. It fell flat. Everyone misunderstood my intent, and it came off as cruel, almost like I wished harm on her. The mood grew painfully heavy, and I finally agreed to take a look at the journal. Later that night, I flipped through a few pages just to confirm it was genuine. The aged cover and smudged ink pointed to months of regular use. The pen attached seemed well used. But even knowing it was real, I still have no desire to read it. No amount of reflection in those pages can undo what's already happened. Her new therapist seems legitimate, an experienced professional with published research and solid credentials. Both our families seem to think this is all salvageable, that one more conversation might fix everything. But they don't understand. This wasn't a small mistake, it was a devastating betrayal. Being told to talk it out felt like they were minimizing the pain I had endured. We've known each other for 9 years and were together for 5. Even if her actions were fueled by emotional turmoil, I can't imagine going back. The woman I once loved feels like a stranger to me now, one whose memories I still carry, but whose presence feels unfamiliar. She looked beautiful that day, carefully dressed, wearing the perfume I'd once said I liked, even in the dress I gave her. But none of it changed the fact that the foundation between us had cracked beyond repair. The journal still sits untouched on my nightstand. I doubt I'll ever open it. Our families are still hoping for a second meeting next week, convinced I'll change my mind after reading it. Maybe they believe we can rebuild something from the ruins. But even if we could, it would never be what it once was. She may still be the person I used to love, but she's not the same. And neither am I.